Hello, welcome back to youtube.com, specifically this channel. If it looks a little bit darker right now than it normally does when I film videos, that's because it is. It now gets dark at 5 p.m., so I'm attempting just to shoot with artificial lights and nothing natural coming through the window, so apologies if a little bit of adjustment is needed before I film the next one. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about the concept of weird girl literature or weird girl books. This is kind of a category of book that I see kind of a lot around the internet, at least in the circles that I run in, because that is very much my forte. Some would even call me a weird girl. My bullies were very creative. Anyway, I wanted to discuss it because I feel like weird girl literature, as I have seen, right? Like recommendations and discussions about it, are actually like at least three different subcategories, like stuffed into a trench coat. And I don't think that anyone has really talked about the distinction between like the different types of weird girl books. So I wanted to start. And today I wanted to do recommendations on one specific kind of subcategory. We will get there. Anyway, I think from what I've been able to observe, the three categories are as follows. There's the kind of like hot mess express weird girl books where it's a pretty like realistic plot line, but like the main character is a mess and a half, and I don't know, the reader is just kind of like following this girl's kooky life. Two, I think, is like gross weird girl books. I think you could put a lot of like horror in this category too, but like books that are weird because they are gross, they discuss things that are taboo, etc., etc. And then lastly, the category that I'm going to talk about today is surreal weird girl books. Books that are weird because they're very surreal. The things that are happening in them could not happen in real life, and you feel like you're inside of a Dali painting, or maybe the painting of a female surrealist, Remedios Varo. Anyone? Anyway, we'll get to her. Not her book. I don't think she wrote anything, but she's in my notes for a later discussion. Anyway, where was I? But yeah, I wanted to kind of like, I don't know, start this discussion about what we think the different categories are and then at least offer like my picks. I think that there's a lot of overlap between these three categories. I think there's a lot of books that can be kind of all of the above, but there's a lot of books that are kind of like, I don't know, passed around in the kind of like weird girl book recommendation circles. Um, that like I think are prominently one, and I think that I don't know, maybe we can start distinguishing it because I think sometimes I've seen some videos where there's some stuff that's like some pretty like intense, like grotesque, like body horror, weird stuff, right alongside a book that's like, oh, she has generalized anxiety disorder and that ruins her life. Which I mean, like, I'm not diminishing that. I'm not trying to downplay that. However, those are two completely different vibes. Entirely different vibes. Both worth reading about, in my opinion. Both the sort of book that I might pick up, but entirely separate, entirely different vibes. Anyway, so I do want to get going on these. I tried to pick a mix of books that I haven't really seen much. I think the first one I'm going to talk about I have seen around a little bit. And the rest of them after that first one, I want to say are maybe talked about a medium to low amount, if at all. Although I do feel like the internet has kind of like figured me out algorithmically, and sometimes I'll see a book that I'm like, oh, everyone's reading that. And then I'll go to log it on Goodreads and it has like 15,000 Goodreads reviews. For comparison, like some of the really, really popular book series will have like millions or at least a million reviews. And even like the most popular, like lit fic stuff, it's at least in the hundreds of thousands. So I don't really know how much anything is talked about. And I'm trying to spend less time online. So even if, one of these books has kind of popped off in the algorithm lately, at least the algorithm that I would see, and maybe you if you're seeing this video, I don't really know. But anyway, I think other than the first one that I'm going to talk about, I think these books are lesser talked about. And I think it's time for some more variety in the Weird Girl book discussion. So let's go. The first one I wanted to talk about is Rouge by Mona Awad. I considered putting Bunny by the same author in this video, although that book is, I think, even more popular than this one, and I've already talked about it in one of my previous videos, so I don't have that many videos yet. I don't really want to be repeating books too much, especially books that are already pretty popular and well known. But if by some chance you've never heard of Bunny and you're into kind of surrealist stuff, look it up. Bunny by Mona Awad. Anyway, Rouge by Mona Awad, completely different and separate book. I feel like this arguably could be more like magical realism slash some very like light fantasy or something along those lines. Although I feel like the line between surreal and magical realism is like kind of thin. I'm not an expert. I don't know if I could officially academically define where that line is, but I feel like it's maybe not thin, but maybe thick and kind of blurry. Anyway, what's this book about? This book is about a woman who lives in Montreal, Canada, and she has to go to California to attend her mother's funeral. Her mother has lived in California for many years at this point. At one point, when she was a child, she was kind of left with her grandmother in Montreal so her mother could move there. And she has had a very maybe complicated relationship with her mother. She has always kind of looked up to her mother as like the ideal of glamorousness and beauty and, I don't know, desire. And she struggles a little bit because her mom is just like a white Canadian and her father is Egyptian. And she takes after her father's features. And so she doesn't really look very much like her mom, who she kind of upholds as this like ideal of beauty. And I think that, societally, she doesn't feel like she fits the kind of mold, the kind of standard that maybe some of the other girls at school do. And she's kind of stuck between these two cultures and beauty ideals. What makes it worse is she's not really in touch with her father's side because he died when she was very little. So she goes to California to, attend the services, to clean out her mother's house, to do all the things you have to do when someone who is very close to you passes. And she gets kind of caught up in this beauty cult. A lot of the kind of childhood insecurity about her appearance in, maybe not meeting the standard that she feels like she has to meet in order to be beautiful has kind of manifested itself in like an obsession with appearance. She is very, very obsessed with like skincare and following skincare influencers and having a 55-step routine so she can look, beautifully smooth and young forever and ever and ever. And this cult, I guess, wants to offer her some free beauty treatments. I feel like I should give you like an example of what makes this surreal because based on the way that I have described this, it doesn't really sound surreal, but just let me leave you with this little nugget that I don't think will spoil anything for you. Magic mirror that Tom Cruise can come through and talk to you with. That's what I'll say. I don't really think that's a spoiler, but that at least gives you an idea of some of the kind of wackiness in this book because based on that, I didn't think this was going to be as weird as it was. I'll say it. I didn't think it was going to be as weird as it was. And I don't think it's the weirdest one on this list, but that's a little morsel of wackiness to leave you with. And that's, I think, as far as I will go in this review. Um, Actually, I lied. I do want to go a little bit further because this book is really popular, and I have a feeling that at least someone watching this might have seen it. So if you have not seen it, I mean, read it, oh my god. And I do feel like this book, the way it's discussed, kind of does a disservice to it. Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it's really shallow. So if you haven't read this book and what I have said so far intrigues you, skip to the next book. I will put the timestamps down in the description. Skip to the next one. But I do want to talk about some things that could be like spoilery. So again, if you reasonably will pick this up and read it, feel free to skip. Anyway, um, so she's offered these like free treatments, and it kind of sucks her in. I think it's really interesting the way that the treatments kind of like, well, you know, kind of maybe on the nose, like made her physically like whiter, like in complexion, but also just kind of like flattened her mentally. Like the treatments kind of like took away slowly everything that made her her. It whitened her skin. It took away her kind of like mental faculties, and I just want to like just really like flattened and smoothed her out, made her look the exact same as everyone in the cult. And I think that that's like interesting. I would love to make a video that goes in depth about a bunch of books surrounding beauty standards in the beauty industry and whatever. I would love to get a kind of diverse array of books from different perspectives, maybe fiction and nonfiction. So if that sounds interesting to you, just that video could be coming eventually. But this would definitely be featured in that. But like, I think maybe that's like a little bit on the nose, but I haven't even really seen it like discussed in the discussions of this like book. I feel like I've only ever seen like, I don't know, like I've never, when I read this book, like to me, I was like, oh, this actually like says a lot more than I thought it did, because it was just like, oh, haha, like it's, a cult. And like, I do think that beauty standards are kind of a cult, and the beauty industry is kind of a cult. I think there are some really long standing beauty standards that I think that over the last 10 or so years we have begun to challenge. But first of all, I don't know if they've been successfully challenged everywhere and, sufficiently. And two, even if we are seeing like a slightly more diverse group of people kind of like considered to be like the standard of beauty, I, there still are like a lot of similarities in the way that people look who are considered beautiful. Like, do you guys remember like a couple years ago when everyone was getting the buccal fat removal surgery, like all of the celebrities? Uh, I think that some people have somehow gotten it reversed, like maybe like cheek filler or something. But that was crazy to me because I'm like, like there's all these beautiful women who, they all look, somewhat different, but then they all got the buccal fat removal surgery. So like, like no matter what, beautiful, unique features they had, they all had these like hollowed out looking cheeks. It was like kind of trendy for a while. The cult in this book, I don't know, kind of doesn't really cover that dynamic, like of the kind of like the trendiness of these things, but it does kind of cover, I don't know, I guess just like the idea that like, I don't know, there's this ideal beauty that everyone is still chasing, and maybe it looks slightly different than it did, a few years ago, but it's still oppressive. Like I don't like, I don't want to get my cheeks hollowed out surgically, and like I don't have to. But there are people in the public eye who feel like they do. I don't know. So anytime a new beauty thing starts to become trendy, like BBLs, I think are kind of going out of like fashion. But for a while, it was like you got to get a BBL because you have to be like slim thick or whatever, like that's really invasive. That's a really invasive, dangerous surgery. And the fact that so many women kind of felt like pressured into undertaking something that extreme in order to look beautiful in the same way as other women looked beautiful, with like, a skinny waist and, thick under the, I don't know what YouTube will let me say. But the fact that so many women felt like they needed to do that instead of just bracing, like maybe they had like narrow hips or kind of like more of like an apple shape or whatever, like, but I don't know. A lot of women felt like they needed to um, undo things that they were kind of naturally given to look beautiful, but that beauty was the same. I feel like I'm kind of just like repeating the same point over and over again. I don't really know if I've gone as in depth into this book as I would, I don't know, maybe like to go, into in like a book that's just kind of like about the beauty industry generally. I think this book, as much as popular as it is, I feel like it's like at least like maybe under discussed. I haven't really seen a lot of good discussion about it. And those are my very like initial kind of surface level thoughts, but I'd be interested to see what others thought, and maybe there will be more thoughts in an upcoming video where I kind of hone in on the topic of beauty and the beauty industry and social pressures and sameness and whatever, what have you. The next book that I wanted to talk about is one that is less surreal, but I think is worth talking about. I especially think it's worth talking about because this was already in my quarter 3 wrap up video, but not many people watched that. And I do think that this book maybe deserves a little bit more hype than it has gotten. I've seen it around, but like not a ton. And that is My Death by Lisa Tuttle. This book is one that I think that I originally saw in like weird girl, I don't know, like weird girl book picks, things like that, like lists, videos, kind of along those lines. And when I started reading it, I was like, why is this on those lists? Like, there's a little bit in the beginning that's a little like, little kooky, a little kooky, like, stuff in like the first half, but like nothing really that strange. This is about a woman who is an author and she's trying to come up with an idea for her next project. And she remembers this painting that she used to be obsessed with when she was in college, when her in her younger years. And she becomes fixated on the muse of the painting. She discovers that the muse of the painting, who was kind of an author and an artist in her own right, is still alive, and she decides that she wants to track her down and interview her so she can like write a biography on her. And like that's really cool, that's very touching. And like there was like if that alone makes you want to read this, like read this. But if you think you need a little bit more, trust me, once you get towards the end you start being like, what's going on, what's happening here? And the end is kind of a little bit of a mind bender. I did not see that twist coming. I kind of suspected I suspected something was going on. I didn't think it was gonna be that. So this one's not super long. I think this is like 100 pages. So hold on. Hold on till the end. I think that's all I'm gonna say on this, just because like I have talked about it and I do think that it's short and it's the kind of thing that you just kind of need to read yourself. But that is My Death by Lisa Tuttle, and I think this should be talked about more than it is. Okay, next I'm getting into my books that are really kooky, because I think Rouge and My Death both could be read by someone who's kind of like new to like weirder literature. I don't think that I would recommend either of them just to like anyone off the street. If I had a friend who I knew had a taste that was just a, like not super kooky, not super crazy, but like they can dabble in some weirdness, I might recommend those. maybe because there is enough kind of realism in them that you're not kind of totally immersed in the craziness from the jump. You have some time to kind of come up and breathe a little bit. These next three, not really, not really as much. The first one kind of this group, which I will kind of talk about the varying levels of craziness in those, because I mean they're still a little bit varying. This one's the kookiest. This one's the kookiest. This is the one that is really not for everyone, and that is You Too Can Have a Body Like Mine by Alexandra Kleeman. Oh boy. I read this book years ago, and it took me quite a while to get through it because there were times where I was just kind of like, what's going on? I don't think I'd read enough things kind of in this genre and category yet in order to, I think, like fully embrace it, but I was kind of along for the ride, and I did kind of want to see where it goes. And I do like stuff that is weird, maybe just kind of for the sake of being weird. So I was willing to just kind of like, I don't know, just keep going, give it a shot. So I got through it after a while, and let me tell you, I still think about this one quite a bit many years later because I don't know if it's like I wouldn't say it's like a favorite book of mine. I wouldn't say this is like the best book ever by any means, but it's just so singular to me, just so incredibly singular. I have not read another book quite like this. So, what's this about? What isn't this about? Anyway, the characters in this book do not have names. They're just A, B, and C, right? So, this is about A and C, who are in a relationship together. They both watch a lot of reality TV. C wants A to join him on this really bizarre reality TV show called, like, That's My Partner or something, that I don't remember exactly the details of it, but like it was very like extreme. If you like won or lost, the what you got or like what you didn't get was like kind of extreme. And then there's B, who is the roommate of A and wants to make herself exactly like A. This book takes place in America. Where in America, you ask? I think it's very intentionally kind of ambiguous. Like it's simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. I think it kind of does a good job at critiquing a lot of the kind of like, I don't know, like kind of flat and meaningless parts of American life and culture. I think the setting is one of them. I think that it kind of pokes fun at the idea that like the US kind of like lacks architectural character. And I wouldn't say that that's like true everywhere. I do live in a city where I think there is some very beautiful and unique architecture. I guess lucky to have that, but it's only like a very small portion of the city. And there are places that are kind of, everywhere and nowhere, like every American city. Like, if you're driving down the road, chances are, if you live kind of in a suburb or an exurb or something like that, on the outskirts of a city, maybe, I think the exceptions to this are people who live kind of like in the urban areas, and even then, like there's some of this. Like, you're most likely going to be driving down like this wide boulevard that is completely inaccessible to pedestrians and bikers, and there's going to be rows and rows of various chains. You're going to pass by an Applebee's, and you're going to pass by a TJ Maxx, and you're going to pass by a Home Good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of places here are just kind of like boring because it's all the same. And I can think of very few places outside of cities where there's this like architectural integrity. Like, one of the few places that I can think of is Cape Cod. Cape Cod, a lot of their zoning laws really force businesses to kind of keep the character of the kind of like local architecture. But Cape Cod is like not really a place that everyone can live. It's a place where most people like go on vacation at best, and if you're gonna, I don't know. Anyway, that's kind of getting a little away from a point. But so it this book, whew, this book kind of tackles, that kind of like everywhere and nowhere, and also kind of the emptiness and the kind of strangeness of a lot of our TV choices and our food choices. In this book, you often see the characters watching some like random reality TV show that is just kind of like cartoonishly over the top satire of what reality TV is, and then also watching just like advertisements that are again like cartoonishly over the top, mockery of advertisements, and eating a lot of really sugary prepackaged foods and just kind of not really questioning any of this. And I think that it's really interesting because this book was written only about 10 years ago, I think, and already our relationship to a lot of this is very much the same, but also very different. I think that today, if this was written today, you would replace the TV with social media, and you would replace the advertisements with just like the stuff that influencers make, and how a lot of it really truly is just like trying to sell you something, whether that's a product or a course or, I don't know, just the idea of a lifestyle, keep watching my stuff sort of thing. And I do think that the critiques about the American food system are, I don't know, they're not really super plentiful. It just kind of mostly shows just like, the, tendency towards over processed, over manufactured stuff. But I do think that that could be still relevant in a lot of places and for a lot of people, but also potentially replaced with kind of like the trendy health food du jour sort of thing. Like, why is everyone eating so much cottage cheese? Good God. If you had told society 3 years ago that everyone would be eating cottage cheese, you'd be like, you're out of your damn mind. No one likes cottage cheese, And, before that, it was, I don't know, I don't really keep track of these things. Anyway, I do think that this book did a kind of, it was kind of like an interesting reflection, kind of like a fun house mirror reflection of a lot of things that, I don't know, the astute observer would kind of see in our society. So that was fun. I would love to reread this at some point just because, I don't know, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And I do think that there's probably more in this book that I didn't really get, or maybe it just is that simple. And I don't know. But yeah, this one is relentlessly wacky. It really hits you over the head with it. So be warned. Next is a book that I think does kind of relent a little bit in its wackiness, but is still overall pretty strange. Anyway, that is Paradise Rot by Jenny Hval, and it is translated by Mariam Idris. I really want to get really consistent at crediting translators when there is a translated work of fiction. I did great in my first video when it was all about translated fiction, but sometimes I forget when they're just kind of like mixed in with things. So, but yeah, this is translated from Norwegian, the original language, and this is about a student who moves abroad to go to university, and she's kind of, I don't know, struggling with adjusting. She moves into this place that's really cheap with a roommate, and it doesn't really have any like real walls. It's a converted like factory, I think, like some sort of like industrial space. And she is, with this roommate who's a little kind of odd, doesn't really know boundaries, and the actual kind of physical building kind of starts to rot and fall down around them. A lot of what is, I guess, portrayed in this book is main character's slow coming to terms with the fact that she might be into women, and she didn't really have an inkling of this before. So she's here with this roommate, and kind of like everything is collapsing around her. And I think that that's a really interesting allegory for kind of an awakening like this. I think sometimes when you learn something new about yourself, sometimes it's just like, okay, cool. But when it is really life shifting like this, I think that there could be other like really like life shifting realizations and discoveries beyond just like realizing that, you know, other than maybe realizing that you're queer or something along those lines. I think maybe like a diagnosis could similarly be life shifting. But sometimes when there is a realization like that profound, yeah, like everything does kind of like start to collapse and rot, and maybe some little new things kind of grow out of that decay, and you can kind of start to I don't know, renew your life, be something else. But I think that sometimes like realizations like this can be so, I don't know, just life altering that, yeah, that it kind of would feel like that. And I don't know if that's exactly what the author was trying to get at just by having the physical space around her kind of start to slowly deteriorate. But I don't know. If anyone else has read this, be interested to hear your kind of thoughts as to kind of the metaphor of the rot. It's also been kind of a while since I've read this, so there could be little details that I'm missing. But this is a book that you really just kind of need to experience. Yeah, that's Paradise Rot by Jenny Hval. Last but certainly not least is The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington. This is a book that immediately kind of endeared Leonora Carrington to me. I kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole about her life and the people kind of around her. She primarily was known as a painter. She was kind of part of a group of surrealist artists who were kind of based in Mexico in the, I guess, like early to mid 20th century, which includes like Remedios Varo, if you're familiar with her, Max Ernst, I believe, some other folks. So she was primarily a painter. She was actually one of the last surviving surrealist painters. She didn't pass away until 2011. She was like, I think, 92 when she passed, which oddly enough is the age of the main character of this book. This book is about Marion. She is a 92-year-old vegetarian, and she is starting to lose her hearing a little bit. So her friend gives her a hearing trumpet so she can kind of better hear what is going on around her. And her family is kind of getting sick of her. It kind of seems like maybe they're just kind of annoyed that she's been kind of sticking around this much and like needs this much help and attention at this point. And they start saying like, we need to send you away to, a facility where you can, where they can help you because you're starting to kind of lose it. But Marion is very insistent that she is sharp and capable and, whatnot. And a lot of the book I was kind of questioning whether or not Marion truly was seeing things that were distorted by her dementia, as her family, believes she has, or if her family was simply trying to get rid of her and the world that this book exists in is so like is as wacky as she perceives it. Anyway, I went really back and forth throughout the book. Maybe it's intentionally ambiguous, like maybe that's part of the point. But anyway, she moves to this kind of like senior living facility with a bunch of other older ladies, and chaos ensues. Chaos really ensues. She winds up having to stop the end of the world with a number of them. There is the Holy Grail, the goddess Venus, a wolf queen, there's all sorts of crazy stuff, and Marion and her gang of old ladies, both the ones in the home and her friend who comes in and helps her. It starts snowing in Mexico because this takes place in Mexico. All sorts of crazy stuff happens, and I don't really know if kind of talking about it will really sell it. Like, I really do think that you just kind of need to read this one. And I know I've said that about a lot of these, but I think the thing with kind of surreal books is like I can kind of tell you a bunch of random kind of crazy wacky things about them, but unless you read them in context, I don't really know if it's going to like do anything for you other than just be like, "Well, that's crazy." So, read this. This is, The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington. Recently, her book, The Stone Door, just came back into print. It was out of print for a long time, and NYRB, the same publisher that did this one, and actually My Death by Lisa Tuttle earlier, they recently published that one. I have my hands on it, and I do hope to read it really soon. So if I were to do a part two to this, maybe that would be on my part two of kind of surreal weird girl books. But yeah, I think that is going to be it for today. I hope that you enjoyed. Let me know down below what weird books you have enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on any of the books that I have discussed. And let me know what you think about the subcategories of weird girl books. I would be willing to hear other suggestions. This is just kind of me spitballing. But yeah, I think that's all for today, and goodbye.